Hi, good morning, welcome back. Now today, Yamaha XJR 1300 fat bar conversion. But first, as this has been quite a long project and we're almost there now, let's just recap everything I've done so far. Swing arm bearings, rear suspension, rear wheel bearings, chain and sprockets, rear caliper rebuild with new pads, front calipers rebuilt with new pads, clutch slave cylinder rebuild, clutch master cylinder rebuild, brake master cylinder rebuild, front wheel bearings, headstock bearings, fork oil change, new clutch, valve clearances, throttle and choke cables, spark plugs and air filter. And finally, in the last video, an oil and filter change. And all of that so far has been remedial mechanical repair, which means that the fat bar conversion is the first custom upgrade in this whole project. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's go. Now I think changing handlebars is a job most of us can do, but there's a few tricks I can pass on that maybe might help if you're going to do yours. The first being the fuel tank. You don't have to take the fuel tank off to change your handlebars, but you do need to protect it. And as I've had the fuel tank off to do all the other work on the engine, I've simply left it off so that it's not in danger of getting marked by any tools dropping on it whilst I'm changing the bars. And as soon as this is done, I'll put it back on. However, if your tank is still fitted, leave it on, just pop a big blanket over it to protect it, I think, quite obviously. Firstly, get the mirrors out of the way, and being mindful that some Yamahas, the right-hand mirror is a left-hand thread, so it's righty-loosey. Get the bar weights off. Left-hand bar grip off first. And with the left-hand switch block, the clutch cable operating lever is quite easy for it to fall out and twist and get a little bit awkward to reinstall. So keep your finger on it so it stays in place. Bring the switch block back together, hold it in place, that will stay put, and then whilst you're changing the bars, put the screws back in and that will hold all that neatly in one place. Now normally at this point you've got all of the rest of the bars stripped, you've just got the throttle assembly to deal with. So you take the two bolts out, take the casing off, fish around and take the two cables out, lift the cables out the way and slide the grip off. But that's a lot of faff. Wouldn't it be easier to just loosen those two enough so it's moving and slide the whole assembly off the end intact? However, you can't do that because the cables themselves aren't long enough to slide off the end. So there is a trick to it. All you do is loosen the two bolts so the whole assembly is moving freely, take the caps off the clamps, lift the bars out and slide the bars out of the throttle and then just drop it to one side. And when you come to fit the new bars, slide the bars first into the throttle, then drop them in the clamps. Easy. So before I do that, this is a fat bar conversion. We're not just changing the handlebar itself, we're changing the clamps as well. So while the handlebar is still holding the clamps nice and still, I can reach underneath with a socket and loosen off these clamps, because once you take the bar out itself, there's nothing stopping those from spinning and you won't get them loose. So loosen them first, then take the bar out. Now, as with all aftermarket accessories, they are fundamentally universal. They don't fit any one specific bike, so you have to have a sense of humour and the ability to adapt, improvise, overcome. So, in this instance, Tech supply these bar clamps with a 12mm mounting shaft and a 10mm optional. And I've got the 10mm ones because that's the diameter of the hole in the top yoke, but they are too long and the thread doesn't extend along them far enough. Now, that's the 12mm shaft, which we don't need. This is the 10mm one that we're using. And as you can see, it fits into the clamp with this machined flat surface. And there's a flat in the clamp, so it locates and it holds it still so you can tighten it up. And what hangs out the bottom, as you can see, is way too long. If we compare it to the standard one we've just taken out, that's the length of the threaded shaft required, and it's literally about 1 inch long. Now, as you can see, the thread on this one doesn't start till it's nearly 2 inches long, so all I've got to do is cut pretty much most of that off and then cut a thread into this remaining piece of shaft so it matches that one, and then I can bolt this onto the yoke. Right, interesting feature of these Tech clamps, the big bolt that you drop through them is offset. If you look at the standard factory one, there, you can see that the thread is right in the centre. So it doesn't matter whether you mount it that way or that way, the bars stay in the same position. On these, it's offset. So if you have them this way round, the bars are slightly aft of the bolt. If you rotate them both the other way, the bars are now slightly forward of the bolt, giving you adjustability. That's good. Okay, nearly there. Finally, bar weights. Now the factory sees fit to thread the end of the handlebar with a little welded in thread. They make the bar weight out of a solid lump of steel and they just cut a thread into it so that, rather conveniently, it just screws into the end of the bar. That's just about the simplest and most straightforward method of connecting a bar weight possible, and I love that the most. So I'm hoping I should be able to fit these factory bar weights into these taper bars. So the hole in the end of the bar is 12 millimeters. The thread is 16 millimeters. Now that's enough of a difference to make it possible. All I need to do, a 12 mil hole can be tapped out with a thread tap to 14 mil. This is a 16 mil thread, and that's big enough to be shaved down in the lathe and then recut to 14 mil. So hopefully I can put a 14 mil thread on the bar weight and a 14 mil thread in the bar. If I can screw them in. Let's do these first. Right, now I've just got to cut that thread in the end of the bar. Easy. Okay, there we go. Fat bar conversion by Tech Bike Parts. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Very happy with the result. Exactly the look I wanted for the bike and far better than the standard factory setup. Now obviously at this point you do the relevant safety checks. You've changed your handlebars, you've disturbed everything, so make sure that everything works. Nothing's pinched, nothing's stretched, everything works okay, full lock to lock. You know, all the stuff you usually remind me of when I've failed to say it. So there we are, I've said it. Make sure you double check everything you've done before you take it for a test ride and again after you get back. But for this project I've still got to plumb up the hydraulics for the clutch and the brakes. I've got quite a bit to do still, so that's okay for now. I can double check everything at the end. Now here's the final point. Accessories are almost never simple to fit. They never come with instructions, and they almost always need some sort of persuasion to play nicely. And I hear so often guys say, "Oh, I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't know where to start." Well, why not? Learn to drill a hole. Teach yourself how to cut a bolt, tap a thread, and file off a rough edge. It really isn't that hard. Learn to adapt, improvise, and overcome. Grow yourself a sense of humour, because with a few hand skills, you can fit any accessory you want. And that means you expand your pride of ownership beyond just riding. I'll see you next time.